This is the statue of Thomas Chalmers in the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland in Edinburgh. Thomas Chalmers was a prominent 19th century church leader. He became a Church of Scotland minister. He later became a Christian, and he later became a very influential figure within the Church of Scotland and later within the Free Church of Scotland. He believed that the local church should meet the needs of poor people in their vicinity rather than leaving everything for the state, and he practiced what he preached. When he was minister at St John's Church in Glasgow, he ensured that every family in the area around the church was visited by church members. So not just providing impersonal relief, he wanted there to be constructive, warm relationships as part of the way of alleviating poverty in his area. He believed education was central to human flourishing. He was key in the foundation of schools for the poor, championed literacy, and helped establish the Free Church's massive education project, which was the precursor to the modern Scottish public education system. He argued for a moral foundation to economics and against reducing human beings to numbers or labour units. He helped spark the 19th century revival of evangelicalism in the Church of Scotland, turning dry formalism into active personal faith. And in 1843, he led the disruption of the Church of Scotland, when nearly 40% of the ministers left the church and formed the Free Church of Scotland instead. And the issue under dispute was demanding the right for each church to be able to appoint their own minister rather than the local landowner or even the government having the final say. He became something of a national hero because he was seen as someone who acted on his conscience regardless of the consequences. So in many ways, Thomas Chalmers is an admirable figure for anyone. You might disagree with him on his religious beliefs, whatever, but a very positive force in society, a very noble character in the history of Scotland, especially for people who are currently associated with the Free Church of Scotland. So that's Thomas Chalmers according to me. Let's hear about Thomas Chalmers according to the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland. So below his statue they've got this information board. So Reverend Thomas Chalmers, 1780 to 1847. It says in 1843 Chalmers led a breakaway group from the Church of Scotland. The group went on to form the Free Church of Scotland, a religiously conservative denomination that remains active in Scotland until today. Okay, £3,000 was raised in the United States in support of the new group. Some donations came from people who participated in and profited from the enslavement of people of African descent. Social reformer, abolitionist and writer, in other words, good guy, Frederick Douglass, who himself had been enslaved, described the funds as blood money. Despite protest, the money was never returned. So you see that most of that plaque is devoted to suggesting that Thomas Chalmers and the Free Church of Scotland are somehow tainted by associations with slavery. Did Thomas Chalmers own slaves? No. Did anyone in the Free Church of Scotland own slaves? No. Did he agree with slavery? No. Was he silent on the issue? No. Here is a quotation from Thomas Chalmers. Slavery is utterly irreconcilable with the law of Christ. It is a system of injustice which Christianity, when fully acted out, must utterly extinguish. The religion of Jesus recognizes the equal brotherhood of mankind. That was from his essay on the evils of slavery. William Wilberforce called Thomas Chalmers one of the greatest men of our age, and they corresponded with each other. Now, when the Free Church of Scotland left the Church of Scotland in the disruption as it's known, the Free Church of Scotland was basically skint. They left behind the denominational resources, they'd left behind the manses, the homes of the church leaders, and they left behind their church buildings. So they were in dire straits. So they appealed to churches of a similar theology in America. And the American churches were very generous, and the churches sent donations to help the nascent Free Church of Scotland. Now note the donations came from churches, not from individuals. Now some people who were members of those churches and gave to those churches were slave owners. And some people, even at the time, which I find quite surprising, but even at the time, some activists said, no, this is wrong, you shouldn't take this money, you should give it back. But I would just emphasize again, this money was not given by slave owners, this money was given by churches, and the money was given to churches by a whole variety of people that would have included some people who owned slaves. So to my mind, this is a pretty borderline case. The connection is quite tenuous, but the gallery grasps it with both hands and puts it front and centre. and has nothing whatsoever to say about Thomas Chalmers' heroic and exemplary actions, and just tries basically to smear Thomas Chalmers and the Free Church of Scotland with associations with slavery. This is an extreme distortion of the full picture of Thomas Chalmers, and it is deliberate for two reasons, I believe. The first reason is to promote race identity politics. I mean, that's in line with the Scottish Government's ideology, so you'll find this pushed in museum after museum and gallery after gallery around Scotland. It's quite tedious. And the second reason, I suspect, is that they would refuse to honour a man with conservative Christian beliefs. Here's another quotation there from Thomas Chalmers. "He best relieves the poor who labours most to reform them, and he best discharges the charity of the gospel who labours most to spread its spirit and its discipline among men." I find that quite interesting. So the poor in his day, what would the issues have been? Well, there'd be all sorts of structural economic issues, but other issues compounding the problems would have been drunkenness, family breakdown, unfaithful, irresponsible fathers, etc. So poverty can result from all sorts of reasons, but it can include bad choices and bad values that are just not conducive to healthy family life and human flourishing. Thomas Chalmers recognised that, and he wanted to address that part of the problem as well. Now, the classic case of that in our own age is marriage, where in general, wealthier people tend to get married, less wealthy people tend not to. People who don't get married, their relationships tend to be less stable, and that is a major driver of inequality. Now, Thomas Chalmers recognised that values matter in tackling poverty. And the Scottish Family Party, we completely agree. And that's one of the reasons why we, for example, try to promote a culture of marriage. Now, if I was in the Free Church of Scotland, I would be pretty unhappy about this portrayal in the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland. But this is just an example of the SNP government's values permeating the whole of the public sector. And I would finally emphasise, if you don't like it, well, do vote for the Scottish Family Party instead.